The weight of the letter trembled in Flora Blackburn's hands as her entire world collapsed with each carefully penned word of rejection from her family back east. April 1878 had brought more than spring showers to Saint Elmo, Colorado. It had washed away the last remnants of her former life. At 20 years old, standing on the boardwalk of a frontier town with nothing but a carpet bag, $4 to her name, and a 5-month swell beneath her corset, Flora had nowhere left to turn. "You won't be finding work in that condition, miss," the hotel proprietress had told her barely an hour earlier, her eyes scanning Flora's middle with practiced judgment. "Not in any respectable establishment in Saint Elmo." Flora pressed her palm against her abdomen, feeling the slight flutter that had become her only companion. Thomas had promised to follow her west once she secured a teaching position, had sworn his undying love and commitment before she departed Boston. But his letters had stopped 3 months ago around the same time she'd written to inform him of their child. Her parents' response had been swift and devastating: return home immediately for a discreet adoption or consider herself disowned. She had chosen her child. And now she had no one. A gust of spring wind scattered dust across the street, making her clutch her threadbare shawl tighter as the setting sun cast long shadows between the buildings. Saint Elmo had seemed so promising from the stagecoach window, a bustling mining town nestled in the Rocky Mountains, with its newly built schoolhouse and growing population. But teaching positions required respectability, and unmarried women with child possessed none. "Miss, you been standing there near an hour now," a gruff voice startled her from behind. "Town ain't safe for a lady alone after dark." Flora turned, blinking away unshed tears to face a tall man whose weathered face suggested years under the unforgiving western sun. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants, faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered Stetson that he now removed, revealing dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "I'm quite all right," she lied, straightening her shoulders despite the exhaustion that threatened to buckle her knees. The stranger's eyes, a startling shade of green, narrowed slightly as they took in her condition with a quick, assessing glance. "Begging your pardon, but you don't look all right." "Been turned away from Miller's boarding house, I reckon," her cheeks flushed with humiliation. "I've simply paused to gather my thoughts before seeking alternative accommodations." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Alternative accommodations in Saint Elmo consist of the saloon rooms or the livery stable hay, neither being suitable for your condition." He hesitated, then extended a calloused hand. "Quentin Porter. I run the Double P Ranch about 5 miles outside of town." Flora regarded his hand warily. "Flora Blackburn," she replied, but kept her hands firmly clasped around her carpet bag. Quentin Porter dropped his hand, seemingly unperturbed by her caution. "Well, Miss Blackburn, I don't make a habit of approaching ladies on the street, but my sister Emma's in need of help at the ranch house. Position comes with room and board." His gaze deliberately avoided her midsection. "Emma's not one for passing judgment on others' circumstances." Flora swallowed hard. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Porter, but I couldn't possibly—" "It's nearly dark, you're with child, and St. Elmo's got no charity house," he interrupted, his tone matter of fact. "My wagon's hitched outside the mercantile. You're welcome to ride out and meet Emma. If it doesn't suit, I'll bring you back tomorrow." The choice before her wasn't really a choice at all. Pride warred with practicality as the baby fluttered again, a gentle reminder of her responsibility. Flora drew a steadying breath. "Your sister won't object to hiring someone in my situation." Something flickered in Quentin's expression, compassion, perhaps, or understanding. "Emma lost her husband in the war, came out here with me afterward. She understands life doesn't always follow the expected path." Before Flora could respond, a boisterous group of miners emerged from the saloon across the street, their loud laughter and stumbling gait making her instinctively step back. Quentin moved slightly, positioning himself between her and the men's view. "Time to decide, Miss Blackburn," he said quietly. Flora nodded, her decision made. "I would be grateful for the opportunity to meet your sister, Mr. Porter." The wagon ride out of Saint Elmo revealed the majestic beauty of the Colorado mountains as twilight deepened their hues to purple and blue. Despite her circumstances, Flora couldn't help but marvel at the jagged peaks silhouetted against the darkening sky, so different from Boston's crowded streets and neat brownstones. Quentin Porter maintained a respectful silence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or offering a steadying hand when the wagon hit particularly rough patches. "That's Double P land," he finally said, gesturing toward a valley that opened before them, where a creek wound silver in the fading light. "Not as grand as some of the eastern ranches, but we're making it work. Started with 20 head of cattle 5 years ago, got close to 200 now." Flora could make out a substantial log house nestled against the hillside, smoke curling from its stone chimney. Nearby stood a barn, corral, and several smaller outbuildings. It was modest compared to the properties she'd known back east, but there was something appealingly solid about it, a place built to withstand the harsh realities of frontier life. "Your sister manages the house while you tend the ranch?" she asked, attempting to picture where she might fit in this arrangement. Quentin nodded. "Emma keeps books too, sharp with numbers. We've got 3 ranch hands who bunk in the bunkhouse yonder." He hesitated, then added, "They're good men, respectful, you wouldn't be bothered." The wagon rolled into the yard, and before it had fully stopped, the front door of the house swung open. A woman emerged, wiping her hands on an apron. Even in the dim light, Flora could see the family resemblance, the same tall frame and direct gaze, though Emma Porter's hair was a lighter brown, pulled back in a practical knot. "You're late for supper, Quinn," she called, then halted when she noticed Flora. "Oh. I didn't realize you'd brought company." Quentin jumped down from the wagon, then came around to help Flora descend. "Emma, this is Miss Flora Blackburn. Miss Blackburn, my sister Emma Porter." Emma's eyes widened slightly as she took in Flora's condition, but her expression revealed nothing beyond polite interest. "Miss Blackburn, welcome to Double P." "Miss Porter," Flora acknowledged, suddenly feeling every mile of her journey in her aching back and swollen feet. "Your brother mentioned you might be in need of household help." Emma shot her brother a questioning look, then nodded slowly. "Indeed, the place has grown beyond what I can manage alone, what with the accounts and all." She gestured toward the house. "Come inside. You look dead on your feet, and there's stew keeping warm." The interior of the ranch house surprised Flora with its comfortable simplicity. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, dominated by a large stone fireplace. Sturdy furniture, a dining table with 6 chairs, a settle, and 2 armchairs filled the space without crowding it. Braided rugs softened the plank floors, and kerosene lamps cast a warm glow over everything. "Sit, please," Emma directed, pulling out a chair at the table. "I'll fetch you a bowl." Flora sank gratefully into the offered seat, setting her carpet bag beside her feet. "This is very kind of you both." Quentin hung his hat on a peg by the door. "I'll see to the horses and be back for my supper directly." When he'd gone, Emma placed a steaming bowl of beef stew before Flora, along with a thick slice of bread. "Eat," she said simply, then sat across from her. "Now, my brother clearly found you in some difficulty, Miss Blackburn, or he wouldn't have brought you here unannounced." Flora's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her spoon. "I arrived in Saint Elmo today hoping to secure the teaching position advertised in the Denver newspaper. I miscalculated the reception I would receive." Emma's eyes were kind but shrewd. "The baby's father, he remains in Boston." Flora's voice was barely above a whisper. "He has chosen not to acknowledge either of us." Emma nodded as if this information merely confirmed what she'd already surmised. "And your family, they've made their position equally clear." "I am to return for the child to be quietly adopted or consider myself no longer their daughter." Flora forced herself to meet the other woman's gaze. "I cannot abandon my child, Miss Porter." For a long moment, Emma studied her, then nodded once, decisively. "The position offers room, board, and $12 monthly. Duties include cooking, cleaning, laundry, and helping me with correspondence and bookkeeping if you're literate. Sunday afternoons would be your own time." Flora blinked in surprise. "You're offering me the position, just like that?" You appear intelligent, well-spoken, and desperate enough not to run off in a month's time, Emma replied pragmatically. And frankly, I could use another woman's company in this house full of men. I'm very grateful, but Flora hesitated, gesturing to her midsection. In approximately 4 months, I'll have a baby. I wouldn't expect you to. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Emma interrupted. For now, let's get you settled. She rose and moved toward a hallway. There's a small room off the kitchen. It's plain, but it's private. The room was indeed small, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand with a pitcher and bowl, and a peg rack on the wall. But to Flora, after the day she'd endured, it looked like sanctuary. Rest, Emma said, setting the lamp on the washstand. Morning comes early on a ranch. When Emma had gone, Flora sank onto the edge of the bed, allowing herself a moment of relief. It wasn't what she'd planned when leaving Boston, not remotely, but she had shelter, food, and the promise of wages. For tonight, that would have to be enough. Later, as she lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the night sounds of the ranch, Flora heard muted voices from the main room. Quentin and Emma were discussing her, their tones low but intense. You can't just bring home every stray you find, Quinn, Emma was saying. She's not a stray, Em. She's a woman in trouble with no place else to go. And what happens when the baby comes? Have you thought that through? There was a pause, then Quentin's voice, quieter still. Everyone deserves a second chance. Flora pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the fluttering movement within. We'll be all right, she whispered to her unborn child. Somehow, we'll be all right. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment as Flora settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to help Emma prepare breakfast for the ranch hand's Luke Simmons, a taciturn man in his 40s, Miguel Ortega, whose quick smile belied his expertise with horses, and Joe Thompson, barely 20 but already skilled with cattle. The men were initially curious about her presence, but quickly accepted Emma's brief explanation that Miss Blackburn was helping with household duties. The physical labor was demanding, especially as her pregnancy advanced, but Flora found unexpected satisfaction in the structured days. There was comfort in kneading bread dough, in hanging laundry to dry in the mountain breeze, in the simple act of creating order from chaos. Emma proved to be a fair-minded employer, neither overly familiar nor coldly distant, showing Flora the Porter way of doing things but remaining open to suggestions. Quentin himself remained something of a mystery. He left the house before dawn each morning and often returned after she'd retired for the night. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but reserved, tipping his hat in greeting or thanking her for meals, but rarely engaging in conversation. Sometimes, though, she would feel his gaze on her when he thought she wasn't aware, his expression unreadable. It was early June when Flora first ventured into town with Emma for supplies. She'd been dreading the trip, anticipating the judgment she would face, but Emma's matter-of-fact attitude provided a buffer. Mrs. Miller runs the mercantile with her husband, Emma explained as they tied the wagon outside the store. She's the worst gossip in Saint Elmo, but she gives fair prices and extends credit when needed. Flora adjusted her shawl, though it did little to disguise her now obvious condition. Perhaps I should wait in the wagon, Emma snorted, and confirm every whispered speculation. No, you'll walk in with your head high. You work for the Double P now, and that means something in this county. The mercantile's bell jangled as they entered. Several customers turned to look, conversations stuttering to a halt when they noticed Flora. Mrs. Miller, a thin woman with sharp eyes, paused in measuring fabric. Emma Porter, she called with forced cheerfulness. Don't often see you twice in a month. We're running through supplies faster these days, Emma replied, handing over her list. This is Miss Blackburn, who's helping me manage the house. Mrs. Miller's gaze lingered on Flora's abdomen. I see, from back east, are you, Miss Blackburn? Yes, from Boston, Flora replied, meeting the woman's eyes steadily. Long way to travel in your condition. Will you be staying in Saint Elmo long? Before Flora could respond, Emma interjected smoothly. Miss Blackburn's position at Double P is permanent, Harriet. We'll need 20 pounds of flour, 10 of sugar, and the rest is listed. As Mrs. Miller reluctantly turned her attention to filling their order. Flora became aware of whispers behind them. A group of women had gathered near the dry goods, their heads bent together, eyes darting in her direction. "Pay them no mind," Emma murmured. "Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal." Flora nodded, but the weight of the women's judgment pressed on her like a physical force. She moved toward the fabric bolts, pretending interest in a soft blue calico while blinking back unexpected tears. The reality of her situation, unwed with child, dependent on the charity of virtual strangers, struck her anew. "First time's always the hardest," came a quiet voice at her elbow. Flora turned to find Quentin Porter beside her, his hat in his hands. She hadn't noticed him enter the store. "I beg your pardon," facing the town gossips, he clarified, nodding slightly toward the whispering women. "Gets easier with time." Flora attempted a smile. "Does it? I'm not convinced. Their opinions only matter if you let them." He studied her face for a moment, then added, "Emma says you're doing well at the ranch." "Your sister has been very kind." Quentin shifted uncomfortably, seeming to search for words. "Miss Blackburn, well, if it isn't Quentin Porter," interrupted a booming voice as the town sheriff approached. "Thought you'd be out mending that south fence line today." Quentin's expression closed. "Sheriff Daniels, fence is mended, just helping the ladies with supplies." Sheriff Daniels was a barrel-chested man with a thick mustache and an air of self-importance. His eyes flickered to Flora with undisguised curiosity. "And who might this be?" "Miss Flora Blackburn," Quentin answered before she could speak. "She's employed at Double P." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, Miss Blackburn, welcome to Saint Elmo. Small town like ours, we tend to know everyone's business." His gaze dropped meaningfully to her midsection, especially when it's noteworthy. Flora felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you for the welcome, Sheriff." "The lady's private affairs are her own, Daniels," Quentin said, his tone deceptively casual despite the tension Flora could see in his jaw. "Double P vouches for her. That should be enough for anyone in this county." Something passed between the two men, an old friction that Flora couldn't decipher. After a moment, the sheriff tipped his hat. "Of course, just doing my duty, ensuring all new arrivals are properly settled." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good day to you both." When he'd moved away, Flora released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, Mr. Porter." Quentin shook his head. "No need for thanks. Daniels likes throwing his weight around is all." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "Miss Blackburn, what I was trying to say before. I want you to know you have a place at Double P for as long as you need it. You and the baby both." The simple declaration, delivered without fanfare or expectation, touched something deep within Flora. "That's very generous." "It's not charity," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "You earn your keep. Emma says you've got a good head for figures too." Before Flora could respond, Emma approached with their parcels. "Ready to head back. Luke's bringing the wagon around." She glanced between them. "Everything all right?" "Just fine," Quentin replied, settling his hat back on his head. "I'll see you both back at the ranch later." As he walked away, Emma gave Flora a curious look. "My brother doesn't usually make social calls to the mercantile." "He was very kind when Sheriff Daniels approached," Flora explained. Emma's expression darkened. Daniels, that man's had a chip on his shoulder toward Quinn since they both courted the same woman years back. "Oh," Flora couldn't help her curiosity. "Ancient history now," Emma said dismissively. "Rebecca chose Quinn but died of fever before they could marry." Daniels never got over the rejection or blaming Quinn for bringing her west in the first place. She handed Flora a small parcel. "Here, I got you some peppermint candies, good for settling the stomach in the later months." The unexpected kindness brought tears to Flora's eyes. "Thank you." Emma looked uncomfortable with the emotion. "It's just candy. Come on, let's get back before those eggs break." As they drove out of town, Flora found herself pondering Quentin Porter with new interest. Behind his reserved manner lay a history she was only beginning to glimpse. Like hers, it seemed to contain both love and loss, and perhaps that explained the understanding she sometimes caught in his gaze when he looked at her. By late June, the summer heat had settled over the valley, turning the morning due to steam before breakfast was cleared away. Flora's pregnancy had advanced to the point where even her adapted dresses strained at the seams, and simple tasks like gathering eggs left her breathless. "You need proper maternity clothes," Emma declared one evening as they sat on the porch shelling peas, the only place cool enough for comfort. "I've got some fabric set aside, we'll start tomorrow." "That's very thoughtful, but I can manage," Flora protested weakly, shifting to find a more comfortable position on the bench. Emma snorted. "You're about to pop out of that bodice like a cork from a bottle. Besides, the baby will need things too. Quinn's riding to Denver next week. We should make a list." The casual way Emma included the baby in the ranch's future still surprised Flora. "Miss Porter, for heaven's sake, after 2 months, call me Emma." "Emma," Flora amended, "I'm deeply grateful for all you've done, but I can't expect you to provide for my child. Once the baby comes, I'll need to make other arrangements." Emma's hands stilled over the pea bowl. "What arrangements?" I haven't worked that out precisely," Flora admitted. "Perhaps I could find a position in a larger town where my situation might be less remarkable." "And just where would you find this magical position that welcomes unwed mothers with open arms?" When Flora didn't answer, Emma continued more gently, "The West isn't like the East, Flora. Out here, people judge you more by what you do than by who your parents were or what mistakes you've made. You've proven yourself a hard worker and an honest person. That counts for something at Double P." "Your brother said something similar in town," Flora murmured. Emma's expression softened. "Quinn's a good man, better than most. He's had his own share of judgment from small minds." A comfortable silence fell between them as they continued their task, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the rhythmic chirp of crickets. The mountain sunset painted the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks, a daily display that still took Flora's breath away. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "Different from anything I imagined when I came west," Emma nodded. "It gets in your blood, this place. The seasons, the land, even the hardships, they become part of you." "Is that why you stayed, after your husband? After James died?" Emma's face took on a distant look. "Partly. There was nothing left for me back east. Quinn needed help with the ranch. And there's a freedom here I never found in Philadelphia." She glanced at Flora. "Is that why you came west? For freedom?" Flora considered the question. "I came for opportunity, the teaching position, but yes, perhaps freedom too. From expectations, from the path already laid out for proper Boston ladies." Her hand rested on her rounded belly, "Though I certainly didn't anticipate this particular detour." "Life rarely follows the maps we draw for it," Emma replied philosophically. "Quinn had his whole future planned with Rebecca, then the fever took her, and for a while I thought it might take him too, not his body, but his spirit." She set aside her bowl of peas. "That's why I didn't object too strenuously when he brought you home that day. He's got a habit of trying to fix broken things, my brother. Been that way since we were children." Flora felt a pang at the implication. "Is that how he sees me, as broken?" "No," came a deep voice from the doorway behind them. Both women turned to find Quentin standing there, his expression inscrutable in the gathering dusk. "Quinn, how long have you been eavesdropping?" Emma demanded. "Long enough," he replied, stepping onto the porch. "Miss Blackburn isn't broken, Em. She's just been dealt a difficult hand." He turned to Flora. "And you're not charity, you're an asset to this ranch." Flora found herself unable to look away from his direct gaze. "Thank you, Mr. Porter, Quentin," he corrected softly. "If my sister's Emma to you now, then I'm Quentin." Something shifted in that moment, some subtle rearrangement of the relationships between them. No longer merely employer and employee, but something approaching friends. Flora nodded, surprised by the warmth that spread through her at this small but significant change. "Quentin," she echoed, testing the name. He nodded once, satisfied, then turned to Emma. "Came to tell you that Miguel spotted a mountain lion near the north pasture. We'll need to bring the cattle closer to the home range until we can track it." As they discussed the logistics, Flora found her thoughts drifting. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, the future didn't loom as a terrifying unknown. She had found, if not precisely a home, then at least a safe harbor at Double P Ranch. Whether it would remain so after her child's birth was still uncertain, but for tonight, watching the last light fade from the Colorado sky, that was enough. July brought searing heat and afternoon thunderstorms that rolled across the valley with dramatic fury. Flora's pregnancy had reached its final stages, making even the simplest tasks exhausting in the summer heat. Emma had insisted she reduce her duties, focusing mainly on mending and bookkeeping that could be done sitting in the relative cool of the main room. One sweltering afternoon, while Emma was in town collecting mail and supplies, Flora sat by the open window reviewing the ranch accounts. The ledger showed a modest but consistent profit testament to Quentin and Emma's careful management. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across the page. "Those numbers improving any?" Quentin asked, removing his hat as he entered. Flora looked up, startled. "You're back early." "Yes, actually. The new breeding stock seems to be paying off already." He pulled out a chair, turning it backward before straddling it, arms resting on the backrest. "Good to hear. The Hereford bull cost more than I like to admit to Emma." "Your secret's safe," Flora smiled, closing the ledger. Up close, she could see the fatigue etched in the lines around his eyes, the sunburn across his cheekbones. "You look exhausted. Been a long day." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing in unruly spikes. One of the hands spotted a break in the north fence. "Spent most of the morning mending it before any stock wandered through." The domestic intimacy of the moment struck Flora, suddenly the two of them alone in the quiet house, discussing the day's events as if they shared more than just an employer-employee relationship. Over the past months, their interactions had gradually evolved from formal to friendly, but there remained an undercurrent of something unspoken between them. "Emma went to town," he asked, interrupting her thoughts. "Yes, for mail and supplies. She should return before supper." Flora shifted uncomfortably, her back aching from sitting too long. Quentin's eyes narrowed with concern. "You all right? Just the usual discomforts," she assured him, pressing a hand against her lower back. "Emma says the baby has dropped, whatever that means." "Means it won't be long now," he said, surprising her with his knowledge. At her raised eyebrow, he explained, "Helped birth enough calves and foals. Human babies aren't so different from what I understand." Flora couldn't help laughing. "I'm not entirely sure if I should be comforted or offended by the comparison." His answering smile transformed his weather-beaten face, softening the hard angles and bringing a warmth to his green eyes that made Flora's breath catch unexpectedly. Such moments of unguarded emotion were rare with Quentin. "I didn't mean," he began, but she waved away his apology. "I know. Actually, there's something reassuring about how matter-of-fact you and Emma are about all this." She gestured to her swollen belly. "Back in Boston, my condition would hardly be mentioned in polite company, only whispered about behind closed doors." Quentin's expression turned thoughtful. "Out here, life and death happen right in front of you, no sense pretending otherwise." He hesitated, then asked, "Have you thought about names?" The question caught her off guard. In truth, she had been avoiding thinking too specifically about the baby's future, focusing instead on simply getting through each day. "Not really," she admitted. "It feels presumptuous somehow." "Presumptuous to name your own child?" His brow furrowed. Flora struggled to articulate the complex emotions surrounding her impending motherhood. "When I left Boston, I had such clear plans. Teaching position, independence, perhaps eventually marriage to Thomas once he followed me west. Instead, I find myself unmarried, with child and dependent on the kindness of people who were strangers 3 months ago." "Plans change," Quentin said simply. "Doesn't make the child any less yours." "No, but it does complicate everything." Flora sighed, absently rubbing her belly as the baby shifted within. "A child needs more than just a mother, especially out here. They need a name, a home, a place in the community." She looked down at her hands. "In Boston, my child would have been born with the stigma of illegitimacy. I had hoped things might be different in the West, but after seeing the reaction in town." Quentin was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and deliberate. "Flora, I've been meaning to discuss something with you." The use of her first name, rare from his lips, caught her attention immediately. Yes, he leaned forward, forearms braced on the chair back. I've been thinking about your situation, about the baby. Flora tensed, preparing herself for the conversation. She'd been dreading the gentle but firm explanation that while she was welcome at Double P, accommodating an infant might prove too disruptive. What he said instead left her speechless. I could give the baby my name. For several heartbeats, Flora could only stare at him, certain she'd misunderstood. What? Quentin met her gaze steadily. Marriage, between us, the baby would be born legitimate with my name and all that comes with it. You can't possibly be serious, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not a man given to jest about such matters, he replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his tone. It's a practical solution. Flora felt as though the room were suddenly airless. Practical. Marriage isn't like mending a fence, Quentin. It's not something you do merely to solve a problem. Isn't it? His jaw tightened. People marry for all sorts of reasons: security, companionship, convenience. At least we'd be honest about our arrangement. And what exactly would this arrangement entail? Flora demanded, anger beginning to replace shock. Would I continue as your housekeeper, only now with the added duty of wife? Quentin flushed. That's not what I meant. You'd be mistress of Double P, same as Emma is now. The baby would have my protection, my name. We already get along well enough. In time, perhaps. He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. Perhaps what? We might develop feelings for each other, like characters in a dime novel. Flora struggled to her feet, needing to put physical distance between them. I won't be anyone's charity case, Quentin, not even yours. He stood as well, frustration evident in the set of his shoulders. It's not charity, damn it. He broke off, running a hand through his hair again. It's the right thing to do. The right thing for whom? For you, for your conscience. Flora felt tears threatening and fought them back fiercely. I didn't come west looking for a husband, especially not one who offers marriage as if it were a business transaction. That's not fair, he protested. I'm trying to help. I don't need your help. The words burst from her with more vehemence than she'd intended. I don't need a man to rescue me. I made my choices and I'll live with them without becoming anyone's obligation. Quentin's expression hardened. Fine, forget I mentioned it. He jammed his hat back on his head and turned toward the door. I've got work to do. He was gone before Flora could respond, the door closing firmly behind him. She sank back into the chair, trembling with the force of emotions she couldn't fully name. Anger, certainly, but also confusion, hurt, and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment. The baby kicked sharply, as if protesting the turbulent emotions surrounding it. Flora placed her hand over the movement, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality that in mere weeks she would be responsible for a new life in a world that had little patience for unwed mothers. Had she been foolish to refuse Quentin's offer? A marriage of convenience wasn't what she'd dreamed of, but it would provide security for her child. A name, legitimacy. The very things she'd been worrying about only moments before he made his proposition, and yet. The idea that Quentin saw her primarily as a problem to be solved stung more than she cared to admit. Over the past months, she'd come to admire his quiet strength, his fairness, the careful way he considered decisions. She'd noticed things about him: the gentleness in his hands when he assisted a new foal, the rare but transformative smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, the respect he commanded from his ranch hands without ever raising his voice. When had her feelings toward him shifted from cautious gratitude to something warmer? And what was she to do with those feelings now? Emma found her still sitting there an hour later, lost in thought. You look like you've seen a ghost, Emma remarked, setting down her parcels. Everything all right, Flora attempted a smile. Just tired, the heat makes everything more difficult. Emma studied her face for a moment longer, clearly unconvinced, but didn't press. I saw Quinn riding out toward the North Range as I was coming in. He looked like a thundercloud. You two have words, something like that. Flora busied herself with the parcels, unwilling to elaborate. Emma hung her hat on the peg by the door. Well, whatever it was, don't let it fester. My brother's got a way of bottling things up that doesn't serve anyone well. The wisdom in Emma's words was undeniable, but pride and confusion kept Flora silent. That night, when Quentin didn't come in for supper, she told herself it was for the best. They both needed time to reconsider their positions, to find their footing again on this suddenly shifted ground. But as she lay awake in her narrow bed, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, Flora couldn't shake the feeling that something important had slipped through her fingers, something she hadn't even realized she wanted until it was offered for all the wrong reasons. The following days brought an uneasy truce. Quentin and Flora were carefully polite when their paths crossed, but the easy camaraderie they'd developed over the summer had vanished. Emma observed the change with shrewd eyes, but made no comment beyond a pointed sigh when her brother declined supper for the third consecutive evening, taking his meal to the bunkhouse instead. A week after their confrontation, Flora was hanging laundry in the yard when the first pain struck a sharp, cramping sensation that made her gasp and clutch the clothesline for support. It passed quickly, and she dismissed it as another of the false contractions Emma had warned her about. But when a second pain followed 20 minutes later, stronger than the first, Flora felt the first stirrings of alarm. Too soon, she murmured to herself, calculating dates in her head. The baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks at least. By midday, the pains had established a pattern, coming at increasingly regular intervals. Flora found Emma in the kitchen, preparing to start bread for the next day. "I think the baby may be coming," she said without preamble, one hand braced against the doorframe. Emma's eyes widened. "Are you certain? First babies often take their time." "I'm not certain of anything," Flora admitted, "but something is definitely happening." Emma wiped her hands decisively. "All right, let's get you to bed and see where things stand." An examination confirmed Emma's suspicions. "You're in labor, all right, still early stages, but that baby's definitely on its way." Flora nodded, a complex mixture of excitement and terror washing over her. "What do we do?" "For now, we wait. I'll send Joe to fetch Dr. Wilson from town." Emma squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Don't worry. I've assisted at enough births to manage if he doesn't arrive in time." The next hours passed in a blur of increasing pain and focused concentration. Emma proved a calm and efficient birth attendant, providing encouragement and practical help in equal measure. By late afternoon, Flora's labor had progressed significantly, the contractions coming hard and fast. "Should someone tell Quentin?" Flora gasped between pains. Despite their recent tension, it seemed wrong for him to be unaware of such a momentous event occurring on his ranch. "Luke rode out to find him an hour ago," Emma assured her. "He'll be here." The sun was setting when Dr. Wilson finally arrived, a grizzled man with gentle hands and a matter-of-fact manner that Flora found instantly reassuring. His examination was brief but thorough. "You're doing fine, Miss Blackburn," he pronounced. "Baby's positioned correctly, shouldn't be too much longer now." As if in agreement, the next contraction seized her with unprecedented force, driving all thought from her mind except the overwhelming urge to push. "That's it, doctor." Wilson encouraged. "Work with your body now." Flora lost track of time, aware only of the relentless rhythm of pain and effort, of Emma's steady voice coaching her, of the doctor's calm instructions. Just when she thought she couldn't bear another moment, something shifted, and with a final, monumental effort, her child slid into the world. "You have a son, Miss Blackburn," Dr. Wilson announced, lifting a squalling, red-faced infant into view. "A fine, healthy boy." Tears of exhaustion and joy spilled down Flora's cheeks as the doctor placed the swaddled newborn in her arms. The baby's face was scrunched in outrage, his tiny fists waving in protest at his abrupt entry into the world. But as Flora cradled him against her chest, his cries quieted and his eyes, dark blue and unfocused, seemed to search for her face. "Hello, little one," she whispered, overwhelmed by a love so fierce and immediate that it took her breath away. "I've been waiting for you." Emma, tears in her own eyes, touched the baby's cheek gently. "He's perfect, Flora, absolutely perfect." For the first time in months, Flora felt a profound sense of rightness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever difficulties they might face, this moment holding her son made everything worthwhile. It was only later, after the doctor had departed and Emma had helped her clean up and change, that Flora realized Quentin had never arrived. The realization brought an unexpected pang of disappointment. "Your brother didn't come," she said quietly as Emma brought her a cup of broth. Emma's expression was uncharacteristically gentle. "Quinn's not great with sick rooms, probably thought he'd be in the way." Flora nodded, not entirely convinced but too exhausted to pursue the matter. Her son slept peacefully beside her on the bed, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. She couldn't tear her eyes away from him, marveling at the perfection of his miniature features, the delicate arch of his eyebrows, the surprising strength in his grip when his hand closed around her finger. "Have you decided on a name?" Emma asked, settling into the chair beside the bed. Flora hesitated. She had in fact been considering names during the long, wakeful nights of her final months, but saying it aloud would make it real in a way that frightened her. "I was thinking of James," she finally admitted, "after your husband, if you don't mind." Emma's face registered surprise, then deep emotion. "James," she repeated, testing the name. "It's a good, strong name. Why that one, if you don't mind my asking?" "Because without you and Quentin, I don't know where we would be right now," Flora said simply. "You took us in when no one else would. You gave us a chance." She stroked her son's downy head. "James Porter Blackburn." Emma blinked rapidly, clearly fighting tears. "Quinn will be honored too, though he'd never admit it." A sound from the doorway drew their attention. Quentin stood there, still in his work clothes, hat in his hands. His expression as he looked at the baby was one of wonder mixed with something Flora couldn't quite name. "Quinn," Emma said, rising, "come meet James Porter Blackburn." He approached cautiously, as if afraid of disturbing the peaceful tableau. When he reached the bedside, his eyes met Flora's for the first time in days. "James, if that's all right," she said softly, "to honor your family's kindness." Quentin swallowed visibly. "It's more than all right, it's—" He seemed at a loss for words, his gaze dropping to the sleeping infant. "He's mighty small, but strong," Emma assured him, lungs like a bellows on him. A ghost of a smile touched Quentin's lips. "Like his mother, then, stronger than she looks." The compliment, unexpected and genuine, warmed Flora unexpectedly. "Would you like to hold him?" Quentin looked startled, then uncertain. "I don't know how." "It's not difficult," Flora assured him, carefully lifting the swaddled bundle. "Support his head like this." With obvious trepidation, Quentin accepted the baby, his large, calloused hands enveloping the tiny form with surprising gentleness. For a long moment, he simply stared down at James, his expression softening in a way Flora had never seen before. "Hello there, little man," he murmured finally. "Welcome to Double P." Something about the simple greeting so heartfelt, so accepting brought tears to Flora's eyes. This man who owed her nothing was welcoming her son as if he belonged here. Emma cleared her throat. "I'll go check on supper. Quinn, don't tire her out." She slipped from the room, leaving them alone. An awkward silence fell, broken only by the baby's soft breathing. Quentin continued to hold James, seemingly mesmerized by the newborn. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," he said finally, his voice low. "Luke found me at the far pasture. By the time I got back," he shook his head. "Doesn't matter, I should have been here, it's all right," Flora assured him. "Emma was wonderful and Dr. Wilson arrived in time." Quentin nodded, still not meeting her eyes. "About what I said before, my offer, I didn't mean to insult you." Flora's heart thumped painfully in her chest. "I know, I overreacted." "No, you were right." He finally looked up, his green eyes serious. "It was a poor proposal made for practical reasons when it should have been." He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "Anyway, I want you to know the offer stands, but with no obligation or expectations. The choice is entirely yours." Before Flora could respond, James stirred in Quentin's arms, his face scrunching in preparation for a cry. Quentin looked momentarily panicked. "Here," Flora said, holding out her arms. "He's probably hungry." The transfer was awkward but successful, and Flora settled James against her breast, discreetly arranging a blanket for modesty. Quentin stepped back, clearly uncertain whether to leave or stay. "Quentin," she said softly, stopping him before he could retreat. "Thank you. Not just for the offer, but for everything. For bringing me here that day, for giving us a place to stay, for treating us with dignity when others wouldn't." He nodded once, accepting her gratitude with characteristic reticence. "Get some rest. We can talk more when you're stronger." After he'd gone, Flora looked down at her nursing son, his tiny hand splayed against her skin. The future still held uncertainty, but for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond mere survival possibilities that included Double P Ranch and perhaps its quiet, honorable owner. The weeks following James's birth brought new routines and challenges. Flora's recovery was swift, but the demands of caring for a newborn while attempting to resume her duties left her perpetually exhausted. Emma proved an unexpected ally, stepping in to mind James when Flora needed rest, demonstrating experienced techniques for soothing his occasional colicky cries. Quentin, too, showed a surprising interest in the baby. Though initially awkward and hesitant, he gradually grew more comfortable holding James, sometimes taking him for short walks around the ranch yard in the evening, pointing out stars and animals as if the infant could understand every word. These moments, observed through the window as Flora prepared supper or mended clothes, stirred emotions she wasn't quite ready to examine. Their own relationship remained cautiously cordial, the question of Quentin's proposal hanging unresolved between them. Neither mentioned it directly, but Flora caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that suggested he was waiting for what, exactly, she wasn't certain. It was Emma who finally broke the stalemate, cornering Flora one afternoon as she hung laundry, James sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. "This situation can't continue," Emma declared without preamble. "You and Quinn circling each other like wary cats, it's making everyone uncomfortable." Flora sighed, pinning one of James's tiny shirts to the line. "I know, but it's complicated. Only because you're both making it so." Emma folded her arms. "He asked you to marry him, didn't he, that day before the baby came?" Flora nearly dropped the laundry basket. "How did you? I've known my brother all my life. The way he looked at you after your argument, I'd have to be blind not to guess." Emma's expression softened slightly. "And I saw how you named the baby. James Porter Blackburn, not subtle, Flora." Heat crept into Flora's cheeks. "It was to honor your family's kindness, nothing more." Emma's skeptical hum made it clear she wasn't convinced. "So what's stopping you from accepting? Pride, or are you still holding out hope for the baby's father, Thomas?" Flora shook her head firmly. "No. He made his choice when he stopped writing. I have no illusions there." "Then what?" Flora struggled to articulate the complex tangle of emotions surrounding Quentin's proposal. "He offered marriage as a solution to a problem, my problem. Out of duty or pity or some misplaced sense of responsibility. How could I accept that?" "Is that really what you think?" Emma asked quietly. "That Quinn sees you as a problem to solve? What else am I supposed to think?" He made it clear the arrangement would be practical. Flora couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. "I may be in a difficult situation, Emma, but I won't marry a man who doesn't love me. James and I will manage somehow." Emma was silent for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful. "My brother isn't good with words, Flora, never has been." "But have you considered his actions? The way he looks at that baby, the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching?" Flora's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Quinn Porter doesn't do anything without purpose. He doesn't make offers lightly. And he certainly doesn't bring strange women home to his ranch on a whim." Emma's voice grew gentler. "After Rebecca died, I thought he'd never open his heart again, but then he found you standing alone on that boardwalk, and something changed in him." "Emma, I just think about it," Emma interrupted, turning to go. "And maybe consider that not all proposals need flowery words to be sincere." She paused, looking back. "Oh, and I'm taking James tonight. You and Quinn need to talk without interruptions." Before Flora could protest, Emma had scooped up the baby's basket and was striding determinedly toward the house, leaving Flora with a half-hung laundry line and a mind full of turbulent thoughts. That evening, as sunset painted the mountains gold, Flora found herself alone on the porch, waiting nervously for Quentin's return from the fields. Emma had followed through on her threat, taking James to her room after supper with a firm declaration that she would handle any midnight feedings with the goat's milk they'd prepared earlier. The sound of hoofbeats announced Quentin's arrival. Flora watched as he dismounted, tended to his horse with practiced efficiency, then approached the house with the slightly bow-legged gait of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. He paused when he saw her, surprise evident in his expression. "Evening," he greeted, removing his hat. "Baby asleep," with Emma, Flora replied, her mouth suddenly dry. She thought we should talk, understanding dawned in his eyes. Did she now? A hint of resignation colored his tone. Emma never could leave well enough alone. "Do you want to sit?" Flora gestured to the bench beside her. Quentin hesitated, then nodded, settling beside her with a respectful distance between them. For several minutes they sat in silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening twilight. "Pretty night," he finally offered. "Yes," Flora agreed, gathering her courage. "Quentin, about your proposal," he stiffened slightly. "You don't have to say anything, I understand your position." "No, I don't think you do." Flora turned to face him fully. "When you offered to marry me to give James your name, I thought you were acting out of pity or obligation." "I couldn't accept that." "It wasn't pity," he said firmly, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. "Then what was it?" Flora pressed. "Why would you offer marriage to a woman you barely know with another man's child?" Quentin was silent for so long that Flora began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with emotion. "Because from the moment I saw you standing alone on that boardwalk, something in me recognized something in you." The simple declaration stole Flora's breath. "What do you mean?" He shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling with the words. "You were alone, but not broken. Scared, maybe, but standing tall anyway. I admired that." He glanced at her, then away again. "And then, living here, working alongside Emma, I saw how strong you are, how smart, how kind, even when folks in town treated you poorly." "Quentin, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not good at this, Flora. Words aren't my strength, but what I feel for you, it isn't pity. It is an obligation. It's something I didn't expect to feel again after Rebecca." Flora's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" Quentin turned to her then, his green eyes intent in the fading light. "I'm saying I care for you, more than I should, maybe, given our circumstances. And yes, I want to give James my name to protect you both from gossip and hardship, but it's more than that." He took a deep breath. "I want to build something with you, a family, a future." Tears pricked at Flora's eyes. "Why didn't you say this before?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "Like I said, words aren't my strength, and I didn't dare hope you might feel something similar." "And if I do," Flora whispered, scarcely believing her own boldness. Quentin's expression changed, hope and uncertainty warring in his features. "Do you?" Instead of answering directly, Flora reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "When I came west, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted: independence, a teaching position, eventually a family with a man I thought I loved. Then everything changed. But perhaps—" She looked up at him, finding courage in his steady gaze. "Perhaps what I found instead is better than what I was looking for." Quentin's hand tightened around hers. "Flora Blackburn, I'm asking again, and I hope I'm doing a better job of it this time. Will you marry me? Not just for James, though he's part of it, but for us, because I think we could build something good together." Flora's heart felt too full for her chest. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will." The smile that transformed Quentin's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, radiant and full of promise. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward until his lips met hers in a kiss that was both gentle and sure, a seal on the promise they'd just made. When they broke apart, Flora felt as though something long unsettled within her had finally found its place. "We should tell Emma," she murmured, still close enough to feel Quentin's breath against her cheek. He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly through her. "I suspect Emma already knows. She's probably watching from the window right now." As if on cue, they heard a floorboard creak inside the house, followed by a hasty retreat of footsteps. They both laughed, the tension of the past weeks dissolving in shared amusement. "So what happens now?" Flora asked, settling against Quentin's side as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Now, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple, we plan a wedding, nothing fancy, mind you, just us, Emma, the hands, maybe a few friends from town, and James, of course. James Porter, Flora corrected softly. Soon to be James Porter officially. Quentin's arm tightened around her. I'll be a good father to him, Flora, I swear it. I know you will, she replied, believing it with her whole heart. He's already halfway in love with you. Those evening walks of yours are the only time he doesn't fuss. They sat together as full darkness fell, talking of practical matters where they would live, the main house, with Emma insisting she preferred the smaller cabin out back, when they would marry, as soon as the circuit preacher came through next month. What changes they would make to the ranch house to accommodate their growing family. Yet beneath the practical discussions ran a current of deeper emotion, a sense of rightness and belonging that Flora had never expected to find in this remote Colorado valley. She had come west seeking opportunity and found something far more precious: a home, a family, and a love that had grown not from youthful passion but from mutual respect, shared hardship, and genuine understanding. Later, when they went inside to relieve Emma of her babysitting duties, Flora paused in the doorway of Emma's room, taking in the sight of her soon-to-be sister-in-law gently rocking James. The baby was awake but content, his dark eyes fixed on Emma's face as she spoke to him in soft tones. And then your papa, because that's who Quinn will be to you. Make no mistake, he built this whole ranch from nothing but determination and hard work. You come from strong stock on all sides, James Porter, and don't you forget it. The simple declaration, not meant for other ears, brought fresh tears to Flora's eyes. Quentin's hand found hers in the shadows of the hallway, squeezing gently. She's right, you know, he whispered. We're all family now, family. The word resonated in Flora's heart with a sense of belonging she'd thought forever lost when her parents' letter of rejection had arrived that fateful day in Saint Elmo. She had found her place, not where she'd expected, but exactly where she needed to be. The wedding took place on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees flaming gold against the evergreen hillsides. The ceremony itself was simple, held in the ranch yard with Reverend Thompson officiating. Flora wore a dress of deep blue calico that Emma had helped her sew, with James, now 3 months old and growing heartier by the day, cradled in her arms throughout the vows. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the Reverend declared, beaming at the couple. Mr. and Mrs. Quentin Porter. As Quentin kissed her, their first as a married couple, Flora felt a sense of completion, of coming home in the truest sense. The journey from that desperate day on the Saint Elmo boardwalk to this moment had been unexpected and often difficult, but standing here, surrounded by people who had become dear to her, with her son in her arms and her husband at her side, Flora knew with absolute certainty that it had led her exactly where she belonged. The celebration afterward was joyous, but modest, a feast prepared by Emma with help from the ranch hands' wives, music from Miguel's guitar, and dancing in the yard until the mountain chill drove them indoors. Throughout it all, James was passed from arm to arm, thoroughly spoiled by his newly official family, his dark eyes wide with interest at the unfamiliar festivities. As evening fell, Flora found herself momentarily alone, standing at the edge of the yard, watching as Quentin conversed with some neighboring ranchers who'd come to offer congratulations. The sight of him, her husband, still brought a flutter of disbelief and joy to her heart. He looks happy, Emma said, appearing at her side with 2 cups of cider. Happier than I've seen him in years. Flora accepted the offered cup gratefully. I hope I can keep him that way, Emma snorted. Quinn's happiness has always been his own responsibility, same as anyone's. But having someone to share life with, someone who understands you. She trailed off, her expression momentarily distant. It's a precious thing. I've been meaning to ask, Flora said carefully. Will you be all right? In the cabin, I mean. I never meant to displace you from your home. Emma's laugh was genuine. Lord, yes, I've been wanting my own space for years. Quinn snores something terrible in winter, and now I won't have to hear it through the wall. Her expression softened. Besides, I'll still be here every day, helping with the ranch with James. You're not getting rid of me that easily. I wouldn't want to, Flora said sincerely, impulsively hugging her sister-in-law. Your family now. Emma returned the embrace somewhat awkwardly, unused to such demonstrations. Yes, well, just remember that when I spoil that boy rotten. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Emma had tactfully retired to her new cabin, taking James with her just for tonight, Flora found herself alone with Quentin in what was now their bedroom. The space had been transformed in small but meaningful ways. Flora's brush and mirror on the dresser beside Quentin's razor, her dresses hanging alongside his shirts in the wardrobe, a cradle for James tucked in the corner. Happy? Quentin asked softly, coming to stand behind her as she gazed out the window at the moonlit mountains. Flora leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid warmth of him. More than I ever thought possible. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. We've come a long way in a few months. We have, she agreed, turning in his embrace to face him. When you found me on that boardwalk, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. Quentin's expression grew serious. I want you to know something, Flora. I meant what I said in my vows today. I'll honor and cherish you all the days of my life. I know you will, she whispered, reaching up to touch his face, and I'll do the same for you. Their kiss deepened, and as Quentin lifted her into his arms to carry her to their bed, Flora felt the last pieces of her broken life mending, reformed into something stronger and more beautiful than before. 3 years later, Flora stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching as Quentin taught James to ride his very first pony, a gentle old mare named Daisy, who seemed more interested in grazing than walking. At nearly 4, James was the image of his mother in coloring, with dark hair and eyes, but his determined expression and steady confidence were pure Quentin. Not so fast, James Porter, Quentin cautioned as the boy tried to urge Daisy forward with 2 enthusiastic kicks. Remember what I told you about respecting your mount? Yes, Papa, James replied, immediately gentling his approach. The word Papa fell from his lips without hesitation or doubt. Quentin was the only father he had ever known, and the bond between them was unshakable. Flora smiled, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their second child, a girl, she suspected had been making her presence known with increasingly vigorous movements. This pregnancy, unlike her first, had been greeted with joy and celebration by the entire community. The people of Saint Elmo, who had once whispered behind her back, now greeted Mrs. Quentin Porter with respect and warmth. Even Mrs. Miller at the Mercantile had become a friend of sorts, saving bits of candy for James and asking after Flora's health with genuine concern. Emma emerged from the house, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. Though she maintained her own cabin and independence, she spent most days at the main house, especially now as Flora's pregnancy advanced. That boy's going to be riding before he can properly tie his boots, Emma observed with affectionate exasperation. Quinn started him too young. Quinn started him at exactly the right time, Flora countered, smiling at her sister-in-law. James has been begging for months. Emma made a non-committal sound, but her pride in her nephew was evident as she watched him straighten his little back, mimicking Quentin's posture perfectly. Mail came while you were resting, she said, handing Flora several envelopes, including one from Boston. Flora recognized her mother's handwriting immediately, and her heart gave a familiar lurch of mingled hope and apprehension. After James's birth, she had sent one final letter to her parents, informing them of their grandson's arrival and of her marriage. The response had been delayed but not entirely negative, a cautious acknowledgement rather than a reconciliation. But it had opened a door that Flora had thought permanently closed. Over the past 2 years, the correspondence had slowly increased in frequency and warmth. Her parents had even sent Christmas gifts for James, though they had yet to visit or extend an invitation for the Porters to come east. "Shall I leave you to rate it?" Emma asked, clearly noting Flora's expression. "No need," Flora replied, breaking the seal. Her eyes scanned the contents quickly, then widened in surprise. "They're coming. Next month for a visit. Emma's eyebrows rose. Your parents, here, to double P, Flora nodded, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. Mother says they want to meet their grandson and their son-in-law properly, and to be here when the new baby arrives. Well, I'll be damned, Emma muttered, then glanced apologetically at Flora's belly. Sorry, but after the way they cast you off. People change, Flora said softly, watching as Quentin led James and Daisy in a careful circle around the yard. Sometimes it takes time to understand what truly matters. Emma followed her gaze, her expression softening. Like family. Like family, Flora agreed, folding the letter carefully and tucking it into her pocket. Later that evening, after James was tucked into bed with stories of brave cowboys and clever foxes, Flora and Quentin sat together on the porch swing he'd built last summer, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. So your parents are finally coming to visit, Quentin said, his arm comfortable around her shoulders. How do you feel about that? Flora considered the question seriously. Nervous, hopeful, a little afraid that seeing them will bring back all the hurt of their rejection. Quentin's hand found hers, twining their fingers together. Whatever happens, you have a family here who loves you, remember that. She squeezed his hand gratefully. I know, and that makes all the difference. She leaned against him, feeling the baby shift within her. I never expected any of this, you know. When I came west, I thought I was being so bold, so modern, setting out on my own, making my own way. You were, Quentin assured her. You are, Flora smiled. Yes, but I didn't understand then that independence doesn't mean facing everything alone. Sometimes it means having the courage to accept help, to build connections, to create a family where none existed before. Quentin pressed a kiss to her temple. Wise words, Mrs. Porter. I had a good teacher, she replied, turning to meet his gaze in the gathering dusk. A certain cowboy who found me when I was at my lowest and said, I'll give the baby my name. Best decision I ever made, Quentin murmured, his voice rough with emotion. Giving James my name, giving you my heart. Flora's eyes filled with tears of happiness. And giving me a home when I needed it most. As night settled over Double P Ranch, wrapping the valley in a blanket of stars, Flora Porter felt the perfect rightness of her place in the world. The journey that had begun in desperation on a dusty boardwalk in Saint Elmo had led her here to a life richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined. Not the life she had planned, but the life she was meant to live, with the family she was meant to find. And as Quentin's lips met hers in a kiss that still held all the tenderness and passion of their beginning, Flora knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most unexpected paths led to the most perfect destinations.